Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of On Deck. I'm Justin Joson.
I'm Icy.
I'm Javi.
And we'll be your hosts for today. So as you guys all know, here in the podcast, we like to talk about some pretty spicy topics, that might get us in trouble. Am I right?
Yeah, for sure. We talked about things like, harassment cases in school, pronouns and, terror prof. So I don't know. I kind of relieved that we didn't get canceled for talking about things like that.
Oh yeah, that would have been something, right? But I guess this opens up to the question of why does this become a concern in the first place? Why have we become scared to say what we think and voice out our beliefs?
You're right. So I was wondering, like the same thing. So why is this something we're afraid to talk about? That? So in this episode, we're going to talk about just that.
So, okay. As you both know, political correctness and cancel culture have been all the rage in recent years. Like I swear, almost every single time, let's say I open Facebook or Twitter or TikTok, especially TikTok, there's always going to be one person or two that you'll hear ranting about something that offends them or someone getting canceled. And I don't understand anymore, honestly.
But I think before we talk more about that, we should probably define what is political correctness and cancel culture to our audience, right?
Yeah, okay, sure.
It's definitely an important part that we have to talk about in this episode to be able to define and really talk, have an in-depth conversation about what political correctness actually is. So one of the claims that I always hear people make is that we should care about people's political beliefs because they reflect their values. Do you guys agree with this?
Wait. Before we talk about that, what is your definition of political correctness?
So I actually, for political correctness, I actually have one here. It says that sorry, my bad. Political correctness is language that avoids offending persons of various genders, races, sexual orientations, cultures, or social conditions. And so I think it's learning to be more cautious of certain things or certain words that could offend any minority.
Definitely. And I think political correctness has also especially made its way through media. For example, representation of different races and different minority groups in movies, TV shows, and even, presence online.
Yeah.
What does this accurately represent these minority groups?
Yeah, to accurately represent their true identity and just to make sure that they also have visibility online or media and representation in, just the things like the type of media that we consume.
No, but in your opinion, right? Because political correctness can go, it's a very broad term, right? So for example, I can't call someone the N-word to a black person, right? Because that might offend them. But what if I call a Native American a Native American instead of an Indian? What do you guys think about that?
Wait, so, can you just clarify, what if you call a Native American the N-word? Is that what?
No.
I got lost.
Okay, a better example. Sorry.
Yeah.
I think there was a discussion a while back about the Filipinics combining Filipino and Filipina, right?
A gender neutral.
Yeah, a gender neutral term. Yeah.
There was a thing.
Yeah.
I totally forgot about that. I'm so sorry.
For example, if someone calls us a Filipinix, would you be offended by that? Or would you be okay with it? Or would you rather be called a Filipina or a Filipino?
You want to go first?
Okay, well, personally, if somebody did call me a Filipinix, I wouldn't be offended in any way because it does include me. I know they are referring to me, so that I'm completely fine with it. And that's my thing with, gender neutral things.
For me, I also wouldn't mind. Honestly, like she said, it refers to you anyway. But then, unusual to me, more so at first because in the first place, I didn't mind just being called a Filipino. As long as you regard to me as such of the country that I belong to, I really wouldn't mind. So, since I don't know, parang kasing okay lang naman talaga. For me lang talaga, okay na, whatever you call me, go ahead. But then again, I think that's where to each their own thing comes in. If you'd rather be called a gender-neutral term that refers to you as a Filipino or Filipina, thus Filipinx, am I right? Then go ahead. But I wouldn't mind. Just call me whatever you want.
How about you, Louis? What do you think about that? How would you feel?
I'm really against it.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm really against it.
Please tell us about
Because Filipinx, first of all, didn't come from us. It came from like Filipino Americans from the US trying to like identify like Filipino Americans and basically any Filipino that are an OFW or grew up from a different country and etc. Trying to like identify themselves as still a Filipino in a sense. But then where I stand against that is that it's like a culture thing, right? Like, sure, you're still Filipino, but you also have that aspect of being like an American, right? So it kind of loses that sort of definition for me.
Oh, that's a really good point. Yeah.
Right? And like for us, we're like not a Filipinx. We also have our own language and our own culture. Like we already accepted that Filipino is like a general term. I mean, you don't call someone a Filipino, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we just call ourselves Filipino.
That's true.
So that's okay. But then like, for example, other people like still get mad about that. Does that like make them a sort of bad person? Or is that like, if they agree with that, does that make them a good person in a way? Or no?
For me, di naman eh. Like, it doesn't make you a bad person if you disagree with it. You know, because then that's where, again, I think that's where the episode's gonna evolve. It's really just respect. Parang, if you prefer being called a Filipinx, then go ahead. Diba? And if you disagree with it or you go lang. There's really no worry about it. If you feel it's applicable to you and it's something that you prefer, then go for it. Like, I'm not gonna hold that against you. But then let's say I were in your shoes and I don't agree with it, then I'm not gonna say, no, okay, I don't want to call you that. But then you can't hold it against me if I don't want to call you that either, because like I said, it's not something I agree with.
Okay.
Oh, but like as Louis mentioned, like on a cultural aspect, I do understand that like a lot of the political correctness can often originate from the West, and so like we use it for the Phoenix, like it did come from the state, right, America, and it didn't necessarily need to apply here. So yeah, I guess from a cultural aspect, besides respect, culturally, I also do kind of have a problem how a lot of political correctness can often revolve around the more Western culture rather than our own, because we do have different problems here politically, and it's often things that apply in other countries will not apply here, you know. But on a respect level, I do get that. I understand that. Yeah.
So going back to the topic of the podcast, political correctness and cancel culture and etc. Do we believe that political beliefs reflect someone's value? Or is that like some sort of distinguishable from the individual?
Okay. Do you want to go first?
I'd rather you go first.
Okay, well, for me, yes. There's something, actually, this was something I was looking forward to when given the brief for this episode. Because yes, I do agree that your political beliefs also reflect your values as a person. Okay, because then, just gonna slightly touch on it. Just slightly touch on politics. Okay, let's say there are 3 candidates. One of which that maybe a majority of people don't necessarily like or prefer. And I'm rooting for another person who's entirely different, diba? The reason for which you prefer certain candidates because you think that they have values that align with yours. Diba? Like, okay, I respect this person because they hold values that I like. And I want someone up there who's much like me. But then again, yun nga eh, that's where it's from. It's much like me. And if you agree with certain values that they have, and they agree with certain things, I'm not saying that you have the exact same thoughts, but then I have a concern with that. Diba? So, kaya nga there are people that the moment they find out na okay, you're voting for that person, I might distance myself from you. Because now you're reflecting each other's values. It's not just you reflecting theirs, them reflecting you also, and that's concerning to me. Because okay, that means you also agree with this action, this gesture, this thing that they believe in that I may not personally agree with too. Then I don't want, most of it's something heavy that I don't like, then I might just distance myself from you because I don't want to surround myself with people that agree with certain things. And obviously, I'm not going to force them to change because who am I to ask them of that? I'm just going to have to respect that, okay, that's what you believe and I have what I believe. I'm not going to impose anything towards you, but then there's my space and that's yours and we don't have to interact much further than that unless we have to.
So on a certain level, it does reflect the individual.
Yeah, to me. Yeah.
Like, what about?
I mean, okay, I think someone's values can influence their, their political beliefs and, for example, their voting patterns. I don't think it necessarily says something about the entirety of a person, because personally, I know different people who have voted for completely different candidates, and I've seen each and every one of them, and they have very similar values in life. For example, like something that's relevant here in the Filipino community, obviously being very religious, being very devout to their own religion. I know some like people who go to the same church and they sing and they praise God together, but they voted for completely different candidates. They have very similar family values and things like that, but they have different political beliefs. I think there's a very important distinction between your political beliefs in terms of government and like morality as a person, because the law isn't morality, the law is the law. Those are completely two different things.
Do you want to add
I
it?
agree. Personally, I feel like there is, like what Justin said, there is like a fundamental point where your political beliefs do align with your values. But I don't think that necessarily encompasses the person, because a person does have the capacity to change, right? So like I know a lot of people who were voting for Duterte back in 2016, who then like after the Duterte run realized it's kind of bad. Like what he did was kind of bad, and the solution going forward with it was kind of bad. And when I asked them, would you still vote for Duterte? They said, well, no, not anymore. So they changed because of that. And I think forwarding with the discussion, can we become friends with these kinds of people with differing beliefs from us?
Well, okay, for me, I think it's really important that we definitely don't limit ourselves to people who only have similar beliefs to us, because that will limit us as people.
Yeah.
And as well, it's eventually going to create rifts in the future in our community as the Philippines, because everyone will always have different, especially political beliefs.
Yeah.
But the thing is, we always have a lot to learn from each other, because the truth is not always absolute on whichever side you're on. So I think it's really important that we remain friends and continue to talk to different people with differing beliefs and values.
Oh, I agree. I appreciate this question because I also wanted to like further clarify, kasi parang what I said was a bit lacking. It just seems like I don't want to interact with anyone ever and I don't agree with you. No, because there are people that, I'm not sorry to say it, but there are people that are ignorant, diba, na we can both share our political beliefs and our values towards each other, and they'd be closed off for a discussion. Okay, and the people that I refer to when I say na, oh, okay, that's what you believe and this is mine, and maybe we don't have to interact anymore, are the people that are ignorant nga. Because I've also met people na parang, I don't know if a hypocrite is like the right word, but there are people that would, let's say, again, back to the rent, like they'd prefer this certain candidate who promotes this and that, but in the church that they go to, because you mentioned like church, they completely disagrees with it. So parang for me, it's also important for you to like have your values lined up at the core, because then you're also contradicting your own personal values, and that's what somewhat bothers me, because then in church you preach this and that, but then the person that you want to vote for, they're doing the complete opposite of that. In fact, some of it they might be even going against. And so when it comes to you and when it comes to both church and government that may potentially have a reflection on your person as who you are, see, who are you? And what do you actually represent? Kung ganun. That's my concern there. Diba? But then for people who are open to discourse, and like I said, I'm more than happy to remain friends, because then we can always constantly learn from each other. Our values can constantly change, and as long as you're open to communicating with me as much as I am towards you, then I'd love to be friends. I'd love to stay friends, because I understand that that's not all that you are. It's one of the many values that you have and hold as a person, and that's okay with me. I can respect it as long as you respect me and you're never ignorant to a conversation. That's all it is for me.
After the topic of political correctness, what if like two different people who have two different beliefs, how do you think political correctness can take place in that kind of relationship? Like, Like, what does political correctness do for the both of them?
For me, unless you want to go first. Okay, for me, I think since political correctness, as we established earlier, it's just language and watching of certain terms in a conversation. I really think it's just at least in that perspective, in that conversation, it's just to not offend them. It's to show that you still respect what they have to say, despite you disagreeing or may not having the same perspective that they do. Because if you want it to be a fruitful conversation, then you want to have respect towards each other. You don't want to have you don't want to have any form of ignorance towards each other, because then you're not going to be able to discuss anything.
Yeah, fact. How about you, Louis?
Well, going on with what Justin said, I think, yeah, you're right, that it's for the consideration of those people, right?
Yeah.
You don't want to offend anyone. We all want to be, well, sort of tolerant and peaceful.
Yes.
But I think what my concern about political correctness is that sometimes it's those like people that we aren't trying to offend, they don't really care what we say,
Yeah.
right? Like, for example, going back on my Filipinx example, since it derived from like Filipino Americans, but then when you bring it to the Philippines, we kind of don't care about it, right? And you can probably see that with other sort of words being used around certain other people, that when you ask them about it, they probably either don't care, or that sort of word comes from a different community trying to impose it on the wider audience.
Yeah.
Do you get what I'm saying?
I completely get it, actually. Okay, but regardless of what we think of political correctness, this has obviously had a great impact on our society and the way we interact with one another. What do you guys think about political correctness? What do you think are the pros and cons of this whole thing?
Okay, so for the pros and cons, I think definitely,
I think Justin already said it, right? Like, the pros is that, well, you become more considerate with other people,
Yeah.
right?
yeah.
But, for example, we can see a lot of the cons with this sort of whole thing, right?
Yeah.
What do you guys think are the other cons?
Okay, so I actually had an article pulled up since a while ago. So, for one, it says that political correctness opposes free speech. Okay, that's one. That's one of the things that it mentioned. And the pro of this, the argument is that it doesn't naman. There's two sides to it, in which it says, hold on. Okay, first. Okay, so the counter argument is that political correctness doesn't oppose free speech. Political correctness ensures the respect and understanding needed in debate are employed. In this way, it advocates successful debate, which strengthens the premise on which freedom of speech is widely accepted. Kasi for political correctness, I think that the reason why there are people that oppose to it is because they feel that their freedom of speech is being silenced. Okay, and that's one way to look at it. But then again, the other is, and if you understand it in this way, political correctness isn't meant to silence you. It just censors you a bit. Okay, because no one ever said that you have to stop talking. Okay, because if you say that political correctness silences my speech, if I say a word, okay, na it offends you, or like let's say I say a word, I say the N-word, I'm like, oh, it's fine with me, but I'll say it anyway, because I don't see it doing anything to anyone anyway. You can say na it's your freedom to say that, but I also have my freedom to say that you're offending me with what you have to say. And some people refuse to accept that because they think it's completely silencing them. No, like, political correctness teaches you to use more respectful words that doesn't have to harm anyone, because there are words in which hold certain value. The history behind them are what give them such value. And I think I had a conversation with a friend once that said na the reason because I have some friends who do say these words, they aren't politically correct. And they say na, okay, but if I say it behind closed doors with my friends and stuff, it doesn't really offend anyone because it's just us. I'm not using it towards anyone, like anyone native or anything. So it's fine. It's especially if they use it as a term of camaraderie, particularly the N-word. And I brought that up to my friend, and she said, okay, but for them to say that, doesn't that mean that they're somewhat downplaying the history of the word? It's not really for us to just say na it's wala naman ako masasaktan. You don't know that, but then you're downplaying its meaning. And the more people downplay the meaning, the more people care less about the history it holds. And that's something that people want to protect because you want to respect the minorities in which these words are used towards against.
Right. So do you think that our culture should be this fixated on political correctness, or do you think, as you did mention, there is a sort of censorship there? Do you think we have gone too far?
I think to a point we have gone too far.
In what way? Like specifically?
Well, like we're trying to this will also go into cancel culture. Like for example, if someone says like the sort of wrong word or like something similar, like for example, I see a lot of people in Twitter, like if they remotely say something sort of similar, something that sounds like the N word, they'll probably get canceled already. So I think it does go to a sort of extreme in a sense, right? Like you aren't trying to educate people anymore. You're just trying to police them into following, oh, this should be like the law. But then you forget, why did it happen to be like that? Why are we trying to like educate that kind of person to saying the politically correct word?
Here. Just the fact. Thank you. So I don't know. So would you say this affects freedom of speech for like, certain people?
It does. It definitely does. Right? I mean, like, if your freedom of speech is like sort of to the level na, oh, I have to be careful of what I say all the time, instead of, okay, I can't say that, then I can continue my whatever I'm saying, etc. Okay, wait. I'm trying to process my thoughts.
No, okay, but no.
I think, but like just going off of it, I think a really relevant example is, I think back in 2019, 2018, I recall, you guys know, we all know BTS, right? Okay, yeah. And they did perform a song in the States, and in the Korean language, they have a word that sounds like the N word. Yeah. And I remember that they were considerate enough to change their lyrics so that it didn't offend anyone in the audience. But a lot of people did see that it was unnecessary, but they did that for fear of offending anyone. When in reality, it's just a word that exists in their own language that doesn't offend anyone. In fact, it's a very neutral word. It means me. It means I in their language. So I think, like minor things like that are just things that manifest in things of political correctness and avoiding the use of slurs, even if it doesn't apply to their own culture, things like that.
Okay, so before proceeding, I just want to not add this point, but like just to touch on it, I don't think naman it necessarily, okay, I'm sure that in some way it will affect your freedom of speech only if you allow it to. Because, again, I think there are people that really do impose. I understand, that's the truth. There are people that impose them on you. But then, even if they do impose it on you, no one ever said that you have to follow it. Again, I'm not encouraging that people don't follow if they don't want to. Diba? But that's the truth. That's something people will do. Maybe ignorant, for lack of a better term. Diba? Pero, if I tell you, hey man, like, I just want to share with you that word's like somewhat offensive, you might want to watch it. You don't have to follow what I have to say. You can't say I'm silencing your freedom of speech or that I'm censoring it. I'm just letting you know. And it's up to you whether or not you want to be politically correct.
But doesn't like a sort of fear comes into play in that factor? Like for example, in the example of BTS, sure, they could have like kept that word inside of their song, but then wasn't there like a sort of fear that they'll be outcasted?
Oh, I think that's also what we have to distinguish. I mean, maybe we don't have to, but maybe for another conversation. But it doesn't have to stem from fear. What if the reason that they change it because, okay, we want to be respectful. It's not that we're scared to be cancelled, but okay, you know what? We found out that this was the case and we want to be more respectful towards them and we'll change it if necessary.
Well, there's an important distinction between fear and concern or, respect. Yeah. Definitely. So we'll never know what the true intention was. I know that the main motivation for political correctness is so that the respect for everyone, but I don't know. It has also come to a point where people fear being canceled or people fear having people just turn on them. Oh, like because you use this. Oh, that's not right. You shouldn't say that. It's not politically correct. I know that the most main intention for political correctness definitely originated from like respect.
Yeah.
But there comes to a point, we should like recognize that it comes to a point where some people don't. It's not because I want to respect this person. It's because I'm scared that people are gonna come for me. Things like that.
That's an interesting point, Ice. Now I have a question. Do you think that this has promoted a culture where people simply subscribe to a specific set of beliefs in order to claim moral virtue? Like I said, do you think they do it out of fear, or do you think they do it out of respect, or do you think they do it because, okay, I want to be a good person? Or maybe even quote unquote, I want to be a good person and subscribe to political correctness.
Oh, but don't we need to address the fact that before there's political correctness, there's absolute truth? Before all of this, like, I want to respect everybody, there is a certain line. Like, the bottom line is like, we want to respect everyone. Where is the truth? What is to have like like your honest opinion, or not just opinion, like the truth. What are the facts of like certain things? We need to like address things like that before we continue on. Like, oh yes, don't use this word, or don't use this slur, or we have to talk about certain things, right?
Yeah.
So, in the end, we need to address the facts first. Is what I mean. Right?
That's true. I agree, because I think for you to, a lot of people will only believe you as much as the proof or the information that you give them. Education is always number one. That's why I agree with you that you have to establish the absolute truth first before anything else, because then if you want people to truly understand, okay, why is it so bad for me to say this, and then provide them with the information that says it's bad. Let me know why it's such a bad thing. Okay, Nick, you don't have to do that with all people, but then it's best that you do, because then it's the only way that they'll actually understand where you're coming from and why it's such an offensive thing to say. And then it's up to them whether or not they'll be respectful and understanding of the information you give them, or they'll choose to keep saying the stuff that they already do.
Right, because in the end, it doesn't matter if somebody is offended or insulted by something or not. In the end, there's facts, there's information, and like that's something that needs to be touched up on, because you can continue to like please someone by like being respectful or polite. Like, politeness is the key word here. But no matter how polite someone is, the truth and honesty will never come out, and that's what's the most important thing here. Why are we politically correct?
If people don't subscribe to that sort of truth, right?
Yeah.
Because who is it up to us? What is absolute truth? Do we go to the point of actually, in the modern times, canceling that sort of person? Like what happened to BTS, they were cancelled because they weren't sort of changing, right? That part of their song that sounded like the N-word, but in fact it actually meant something else for Koreans, and they were cancelled because of that.
Yeah, just correct. They weren't canceled.
Oh.
Yeah, they changed it ahead of time because they anticipated that the audience who would be watching it. That's why they did it ahead of time. Like, they changed it for the performance.
But there are other people. They were cancelled because of things that they probably said that they were educated by, or they were probably ignorant of. So when does it become a point that we have to police them through canceling, right? As the modern type goes.
Canceling this, like the artists, or like the people that are trying to cancel them for the thing that they were unaware of?
Not just artists, like anyone in general.
I think it's then really knowing whether or not they knew the absolute truth about it, or like the foundation behind it. Like, did they know that this person was aware that it was an offensive word? Did they know that it had this meaning somewhere else?
Exactly.
Like, because for BTS, they didn't naman. Diba? Like, they didn't know that's what it was here. And so, if they were cancelled for it, they really shouldn't have been, because they didn't know that was the weight of the word somewhere else. It was a word in their own language, which meant something completely different.
I mean, in that fact, on the flip side, political correctness can also be grounded from truth. Like, if, for example, with the use of, again, going back to the N-word, the N-slur, the reason why people don't use that is because it's factual, it's there's proof of evidence in history that it was used as a negative word for a certain like marginalized community. So it depends on the context of the situation, if it's grounded in truth, if it's grounded in information. But like, for example, if I just, in the end, I just say, you know what, I'm offended if you call me pretty. You can no longer call me pretty. And that's just my opinion. So it's like, that's not grounded in truth. That's just the way I feel. Is there a need to be like politically correct about that?
I have pretty eyes.
Because like,
No offense though.
I like what you said because like, for example, in the US, a lot of people tend to get angry at the fact that people call them fat. And they try to sort of reword it in a way towards like, oh, I'm just like obese or something. Or maybe, no, that's just who I am. Or sort of something like that. But then like, being fat is just like a fact, right? I mean, there was nothing wrong with it back then.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like a scientific term also, isn't it?
Fat?
But then it's also a broad term.
No, I mean it's true. No, I'm sorry. I was laughing because no. I was laughing because you said obviously people are called fat, and some will refer to them as with other terms like obese. And you said obese like it's a made-up word. But of course, like obese is like it's
medical.
It's a medical word. So you're like, wow, obese. So it's very
Or like, although for example, a different example,
like healthy.
healthy.
I'm just healthy. Yeah, no.
I'm just
That's true because sometimes
over healthy.
some no, yeah, no, because then okay, no, I understand your point further with that example because then, of course, of course, when you say you're fat, and it's come to a point in which you're obese, it's unhealthy anymore, and you refer to yourself now, well, I'm not fat, I'm just healthy. That's not the truth, because the truth is, you're not in a point where in which you're healthy. You're at a point where it's concerning, and you might have to do something.
Exactly, which is an interesting point when it comes to weight, especially because on either side, on either extreme side, if you're either too thin or if you're either too overweight, either way it's unhealthy. But people tend to touch upon the fact or still get offended by the fact that people who are overweight tend to be offended than people who are quite thin and they're called skinny, and it's like it's more acceptable for some reason. That's more of a cultural impact rather than what is the actual fact of insult, you know? So, but like, nonetheless, in the end, there will always be people who we disagree with. So, you know, it's really important to make an effort to properly converse the way we're doing, and interact with all types of individuals with all types of opinions.
True.
So how do we interact with those kinds of people that have differing opinions from us?
Actually, we just have to be respectful, you know what I mean? I think you have to be
it's conversations like this, we all had differing opinions and differing values, and I think it was important for us to talk about that and like establish a baseline of truth first, above all.
Okay, I'm curious. I really am. Is cutting off a friend due to conflicting political beliefs or any belief for that matter a justifiable action?
If it's based on political or differences in value, I don't think so. Unless it was a personal like action done toward me that I decide, I can't be friends with this person anymore. I think it's important to have conversations like that. If you just constantly cut off people who you disagree with, there is no growth between like for yourself and your friend. Like you need to have conversations about that. You can't keep canceling or cutting off people. But nothing changes except the fact that you have a sour relationship with someone and you're both still kind of your breath didn't grow in this interaction.
Also, it makes you mad too. Because like it's like you're ignorant to the fact that this person could change. Like or just the fact that okay, we have disagreeing, like we don't agree with everything, does it mean that I can't be friends with them anymore? Doesn't make me become a completely bad person. So parang you have to be open to that. You can't just cut out all your friends because you disagree on a belief or two. Unless
But what if that friend refuses to change their opinion or their way of thinking? Do we cut them off then? Or do we still continue the effort to try to sort of educate them in a sense?
I think that as long as it's a belief that doesn't what do you call this? Directly contradict yours, or they don't unless they communicate it to you in a manner that's disrespectful, then I don't see any reason why to cut them off. Because you can always disagree, no matter what the weight of it is. As long as you're not communicating it to me in such a way that you're imposing it on me, or as if you're gonna fight me, then it's fine. Because then we could just have good conversation about it also. Because like Icy said, you can always learn a thing or two from each other. And if you close that door, you cut them off, you're immediately closing that door. And okay, I don't have anything else to learn from you, and I don't want to, just because I disagree with you. And that makes you ignorant.
So what you said, right? As long as it's not affecting you. So for example, you have differing political beliefs or you have differing political candidates, right? Does that affect you then? Should you cut them off then? If they no longer sort of want to adapt their sort of way of thinking, or they're not more open-minded, and etc.
Oh, okay. Like I said earlier, yeah, well, I haven't said it earlier. I was gonna say something, but I'll say something else, something completely different, by the way. I think patience has to play a part. I'm not saying they give them ultimatum na hey, by this time you have to have changed already. No, but of course you can only make so much effort towards a person, in conversation, of course, without having to impose them, to see if you can get to a gray area, or if you can come to an understanding towards each other. And if this belief that they have really bothers you, and you see no progression in your relationship with them whatsoever in that aspect, then if you feel that it's necessary for you to cut them off, and you feel that there's no more growth potential for your relationship, then go ahead. But to completely cut them off right as you find out that you have this disagreeing belief, is, I think, a bit, like I said, a bit ignorant. Because you didn't even make the effort to try and understand. And that's what I wouldn't agree with.
So you sort of find the balance in a sense. Yeah.
Well, with the question that you asked, what if that friend is, really close-minded? I think in the end, you can only continue to love or care for the friend that's, ignorant in the face of truth, because in the end, you can't force the truth. Yeah. And there's definitely, you can learn a thing or two with, talking to people with different perspectives, even if you don't agree. Because I feel like even having those conversations where your beliefs clash can even, you don't have to come away from changing sides, but it can even enhance your the foundation or the rock of of the things that you already believe in. So I think in that sense, there's already that balance of the beliefs of one or of yourself and another person. So going to girls, I think we've established that even in the face of respect, the truth will sometimes hurt. Even no matter how politically correct you try to be, or how respectful you are towards a person, some facts just are, and sometimes they will hurt. It will be painful, but there will come a time when people have to step up and say, no, some things are wrong or some things are right, and we can't continue to just always play nice if nothing fruitful is going to come out of that. There's no point of respect and politeness if it doesn't have a result to something good.
So we have to find the balance between respecting their opinion,
exactly,
right?
Yes.
And also sort of educating them or telling them about our side of the facts.
Exactly.
Right?
Oh, I love what you said there. I see, because sometimes the truth hurts, but the fact is it's just that, and we have to circle back to that, because that's a good foundation. That's the best foundation for any conversation you might have, more so in one in which you're potentially educating another person. You can't educate a person with just your opinions. Have your good foundation. Have it founded in truth. Have it founded in stuff that you know are already true, so that they have a better understanding of what you're trying to explain to them. Because you can't just impose information especially without providing them any assurance of it being true. Because why should I believe you when I have things that I believe in that are founded in truths that I know? So I think that's the best way to put it.
I think that's the perfect statement to conclude this episode. So, and with that, we finally reached the end of this episode. Once again, I'm Icy.
I'm Justin.
I'm Javi.
And we hope to see you in the next episode.
Bye. See you. Take care.
The shot.
Good job.